Welcome to episode 18 of the Party Wagon podcast. I'm your host, Brendan, from the YouTube channel Brendan's Rambles. And I'm your host, Brendan, from the YouTube channel Brendan's Rambles. That's right, Eric is not with us this week. He'll be back on the next episode. So if this one sucks too much, good news, he'll be back next time. This is my first solo episode. Either one of us has done. So let's give it a go. So there's not like a ton of Turtles news. There's a good deal, but most of it's actually video game related this time. So I'm going to start though with covering a couple things I wanted to say in the Mutant Mayhem review last episode that I forgot to mention, like little tidbits, just real quick. It'll be over real quick. And I also wanted to tackle a couple things I learned about Mutant Mayhem after we did the review that kind of answers some theories and stuff I had. So there might be some spoilers minorly at that part. But for one, I wanted to say, when they show Splinter when he's young, I very much feel he was intentionally meant to look like Kevin Eastman when he was young in the 1980s. And like he has the same, Jerry curl mullet and facial hair and everything. So I really think that was intentionally meant to look like Kevin Eastman, which is kind of poetic because Kevin Eastman is one of the fathers of the TMNT and Splinter is literally the father of the TMNT. So I think that was a cool touch if it was intentional, and I think it was. The other thing I wanted to mention last episode that I didn't was forgive me if I get some of the details wrong or blurred because I only saw the movie the one time in theaters, but there was one point where the mutants were talking to the turtles and they were talking about how the humans attacked them when they were on the surface. And they described this one guy, like there's this one guy who was going crazy, and they kind of show a silhouette of him, like, swinging something going after the mutants. And my initial theory, I don't know if it's true or not, but my theory is that that's Casey Jones. And that's kind of their way of like slowly sneaking characters into the universe since they plan to make, a TV show and another movie and another movie and another movie. So I think that was their way of inserting Casey Jones, which would be strange. Not that Casey Jones is an adult considerably older than the Turtles, because we've had that before, but him being considerably older than April is weird. We've never had Casey and April kind of at like mismatched ages. So that would be really weird if we got a Casey who, was way older so he couldn't have a romantic relationship with April or anything. So that would just be a weird choice. But I think that was meant to be Casey, if I'm not mistaken. As for a few things that I didn't know about that I learned about after the fact, on the last episode, I pointed out that, I really liked they had a little hidden Easter egg of Scale Tail in the movie. And I also very much appreciated the movie was just not a bunch of Easter eggs and nothing else. That's what a lot of franchise films are now. But then I saw there was concept artwork that was revealed, and I think it was revealed a while ago, but I didn't see it until after I saw the movie, that shows a full official render of Scale Tail, like official artwork of what he would look like if he was in the movie. And he looks really cool, actually. I'm kind of bummed he's not in the film. So that shows that Scale Tail was meant to be an actual character in the film at some point, which is strange that of all the mutants they bumped Scale Tail. I guess because he came so much later in the original toy line. Not a lot of people know who Scale Tail is, so they figured he'd do better as an Easter egg than as a proper character. But kind of a shame. I love Scale Tail. I love seeing those more obscure Turtles characters from the original toy line get more love, but then I can kind of see why they scrapped him. He was also going to be huge. He was going to be really big, and I think that's why they were kind of using him as like a mega mutant example. There might have even been a point in the script where there was going to be multiple mega mutants along with like Super Duper Fly at the end attacking the city, and maybe he was going to be one of them. But he was omitted from the actual film. Another thing we saw in that image, that lineup of concept artwork, was there's a thug who appears in the movie. He's the guy who, like, when the Turtles are going through the montage interrogating all the different thugs to try to get to Superfly, he's the one who finally, like, turns them in the right direction and gets them to meet Superfly. In here, in this official lineup, it doesn't look as polished as the other official artworks. It looks like they're still working on it. But he's labeled as Rat King, and I'm really glad they didn't actually make that guy the Rat King, because that would have been a really boring, disappointing interpretation of the Rat King, probably even worse than Super Sevens. So I'm pretty glad they didn't just make this generic grunt who looks like he came off the set of The Sopranos, the Rat King. So I'm glad they did that. Also, spoilers for the next minute if you want to skip ahead, but they do show Superfly on there next to Baxter Stockman, labeled as Baxter Stockman in parentheses Fly. So he was actually, like, I had all these suspicions. I was going on this whole, like Charlie Day meme style, like theories of why I think he was originally Baxter Stockman. And apparently it's no mystery. Many people already knew because of this artwork that he was in fact going to be Baxter Stockman early in the production of the movie, and they changed it for whatever reason. But yeah, I thought that was pretty obvious in the final film. When I saw that revealed, I'm like, oh, well, makes sense. He clearly was, they were clearly meant to be the same person early on. But yeah, that's about it for the Mutant Mayhem stuff. Just wanted to catch up there. So now I'm going to go into the news. There's been a ton of video game news, a lot of crossovers. I touched on it briefly in the last episode, but Street Fighter 6 added like TMNT extras. They're not really, like, they're not in the game. You can't play as them, but you kind of can, because you have costumes for your custom character in that game that look like the TMNT. They look a lot kind of like the old action figures, which is kind of cool. I'm not crazy about the idea of Street Fighter having custom fighters, because I think part of the appeal of Street Fighter is that it has such unique, iconic character designs that putting in generic build-a-fighters is kind of boring in a game like that. I can see that more in Tekken, but in something like Street Fighter, where the characters are so realized, I think that's a little boring. But I can see the appeal of custom fighters. Again, I think it would work in a game like Tekken or something, but I don't think it works in Street Fighter. But regardless, they added a bunch of like stickers and little avatars and stuff for Turtles also that you can use in Street Fighter 6. The Ninja Turtles are coming to Minecraft. They're adding a big Minecraft event based on Ninja Turtles. And I believe they're the 87 designs, and they have a bunch of the bosses like Bebop, Rocksteady, Leatherhead, and stuff coming. But then they also have costumes where they can look like other versions. They can look like the Mutant Mayhem Turtles and stuff, which is like, that's basically what happens to every franchise these days. You end up in, Fortnite or Minecraft or Brawlhalla or something, which already has the Turtles. It just seems like the Turtles have become like the generic crossover characters. I believe there was even another announcement that had the Mutant Mayhem characters crossing over into another video game. There's just been so many crossovers with the Turtles. I mean, in video games alone, there was like a dodgeball game that's kind of like Splatoon that had like the Turtles playable, and then they added Bebop and Rocksteady, and even Splatoon 2 had a crossover with Rise of the TMNT, and like it just seems like they're in everything. Injustice 2. Like when you want a crossover character in a video game now, you just throw in the Turtles. I mean, even Call of Duty is getting Shredder. So it just seems like every video game has the Turtles now, and it's cool, but at the same time, I guess it can kind of belittle the brand and kind of water it down. Like the Turtles are just guest characters and everything. But I mean, I guess turtle crossovers have been a thing since the beginning of Turtles with, Usagi Yojimbo and Cerebus and Pandacon and all these other crossovers that they've done. So I guess it's always been a thing with Turtles. So maybe it's totally fine. So also we have Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 is coming out. We never mentioned the first one on here because, it came out a couple of years ago. I played it. I wasn't crazy about it. I didn't think it was great. I'm just going to stick with Smash. But, it was cool for what it was. But it had Leo, Michelangelo, April, and Shredder in the game. And they're the 87 ones. It had like a few arenas for the 87 cartoon. And now they have the sequel coming out, and everyone was always asking in the first one, when are they adding Raphael and Donatello? Because it's hard to have the two of the four turtles and not have all four turtles. It seems like if you do one, like just Leo or just Raph or something, it's like, okay. But if you do two, then it's like, okay, you need all four of them. So a lot of people wanted that. And there was some debate because people were like, well, there's so many Nickelodeon characters. I don't want, like a third of the roster being wasted on turtles. But they eventually did add them. They added Raph and Don quite unceremoniously, actually. They have like a big reveal trailer for Squidward and Jimmy Neutron. And then they just sprinkle Raph and Don in there in the footage. And I assume every returning character is coming back, or every past character is going to be returning. I don't know for sure, but I think that's the idea because there's some characters they didn't show, like Helga or Oblina or Powdered Toast Man, but they do show Powdered Toast Man's arena in the game, and everyone in that game has like an arena for the character. So it would be weird if Powdered Toast Man's arena came back, but not the character. So I think the idea is every character is returning. So you'll have 6 Ninja Turtle characters at least, unless with DLC they add like Bebop and Rocksteady or something. So you're going to have a lot of Turtles characters in the game. I don't know how much better the game's going to be. The first one felt pretty empty. It's like the best way I can describe Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl is a really dedicated team of devs wanted to make a great competitive mainstream game, but their parent company gave them bargain bin money. Like they just wanted a bargain bin game. So you have this weird game that is really ambitious, but can't go beyond being a bargain bin game. So it's hopefully this one has a bigger budget. It's a little better of a game. I'm still just going to stick to Smash Ultimate, but also I personally feel like it is a crossover. I know Turtles have been part of Nickelodeon for ages now, like a very long time. But I still just think of it still just weirds me out when I see Turtles products with the Nickelodeon logo on them. I never think of them as Nickelodeon. I can see, Ren and Stimpy and Cat Dog and Hey Arnold and Rugrats mashing together. I can see those crossing over, but Ninja Turtles doesn't fit for me. And especially when it's the 87 Turtles or the 1990 Turtles, like when you see action figure boxes by NECA with like recreations of Secret of the Ooze's box art, and it writes Nickelodeon on it. That just feels weird. Like, no, that's New Line Cinema. That's New Line Cinema and Mirage. Like that. That's what it feels like to me. It doesn't feel like Nickelodeon. So it was always weird that Turtles became Nickelodeon. I think if it was the 2012 Turtles or Rise Turtles, it would fit a lot better in Nick All-Star Brawl. But I probably wouldn't have bought the damn game if it didn't have the 87 Turtles, though. That's not true. I also bought it for like Ren and Stimpy and all that stuff. Because after I got out of Turtles as a kid, really like the next thing I segued into was Nickelodeon. So it's kind of weird that Nickelodeon bought Ninja Turtles and not like, Disney or Warner Brothers or anything, because it's kind of like the two things I really liked as a little kid kind of fused. But in my head, they don't fuse. I don't know. They don't truly mix. So I always thought I would rather them make a separate Nicktoon fighter and a separate Ninja Turtle fighter. I want a Ninja Turtle fighter, like a proper one, because, we had tournament fighters, which was, it was a novelty, but it was weird. And it did not have the most interesting selection of characters. And the makeup stuff like Sisyphus, and we had weird characters like Ozka and War. But then we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Smash Up, which was like the first like Smash clone on Ninja Turtles based on the 2007 designs. And I never played that one, but again, it had pretty uninspired character choices. I remember when it came out, seeing the comments of people being like, oh, they got to add Usagi. They got to add Bebop and Rocksteady. But like, I don't think they realized that that was at the time where Turtles was not like glorifying the 87 era. They were really trying to just get on to like their new identity. And they added a bunch of Raving Rabbids as DLC, or not DLC, like unlockable characters. I guess that's your Usagi fix. But yeah, I never played that one. It wasn't really what people wanted. So I think what people want with the success of Shredder's Revenge and the Cowabunga collection and everything, and just all the success of the retro Turtles stuff. I think people just want a fighting game, a proper fighting game that has a huge roster of characters from back then, characters from the toy line in the 87 cartoon. That's what I would want. You know, Leatherhead, Bebop, Rocksteady, Baxter Stockman, Rat King, and then even some crazy ones, you know, Mondo Gecko, Ray Fillet, just go nuts. Like put a bunch of crazy characters in the Ground Chuck and Dirtbag, like a bunch of characters that, you know, it's like essentially just taking your toys out as a kid and making them fight, but in a video game. I think that's what people really want. At least that's what I want. And I think Turtles fans my age want from a Turtles fighting game. Just putting like 4 random Ninja Turtle characters in a Nickelodeon Smash Brothers clone doesn't quite scratch the itch for me, but I guess it's still cool that they're in there. But for me personally, I would rather just have a Ninja Turtle game proper and then have a Nickelodeon game proper. But and they put the Ninja Turtles in every Nickelodeon game now, like the kart racers and stuff. But that's about it for their crossover news. I'm sure there's other ones. I just can't think of them. But then there's also been a teaser trailer for the Last Ronin game finally. And we knew this was coming for a while now, for like a couple months. We knew they were making this Last Ronin video game that's seems like it's going to be akin to something like Spider-Man or the Arkham games. It's going to be like kind of an open world, like, you know, you're just traversing the city and like an action open world kind of game. Very story driven, very cinematic, I think. Not usually my favorite types of games. I don't really play those. I just, to be honest, don't really have the time to play those. Like those games are just so big, and I prefer fast, immediate action, like platformers, like NES stuff, like Ninja Gaiden, or, you know, even more modern stuff that, but always platformers and stuff and quicker games. And I'll play other things. I'll play RPGs, I'll play fighters, but for the most part, I like shorter games. I like shorter, more interactive games, where I think this is going to be very interactive, but I think it's just going to be a very long, very big game. Not a lot of platforming and stuff. Maybe because there's a lot of action, but we'll see. The trailer isn't much. It shows, it shows like a quick little cinematic representing how each turtle died. Like it shows the water, it shows the explosion, the fire, and then it shows the arrows in the snow. And it just shows a candle go out for each one, and then there's only one candle left, and you know that's the Last Ronin. So it's cool to see something cinematic official for the Last Ronin, but we don't really know that much about the game yet. But it's pretty hype. I think this game's going to do really well. It might end up actually being more popular than the Last Ronin comic, which the Last Ronin comic was huge. That's like the biggest thing to happen to IDW in the past decade, maybe. But I think, you know, even as big as it was among Turtle fans, like hardcore Turtle fans and comic book fans, I think a lot of people aren't in the comic book scene. So the comic book scene has gotten very small these days. Whereas like in the past, if you were a geek, you read comics. Like now it's like, if you're a geek, you probably have not read that many comics, myself included. So yeah, I think the game can be even bigger than the comic was. I think the game will get more people into the comic, and you know, kind of the way like every Batman movie that came out that had the Joker in got, you know, comic book connoisseurs talking about how great the Killing Joke was, and now it's kind of become like standard reading that almost every geek has read the Killing Joke at some point. But I think that will happen for the Last Ronin. It will get non-comic fans kind of into the comic and do a lot of good for it. And I think it will make a lot of people who are just completely oblivious to the Last Ronin comic discover this story and think it's really cool and be like, oh, this is a really cool, you know, unique take on the Turtles. And might even give it enough popularity where they make a movie out of it, because I know that's kind of the end game for a lot of people. There seems to be this idea that a property doesn't fully make it until it gets a big Hollywood movie. That's still kind of a stigma people have, even though that's not a thing really anymore. But it does seem like if a comic's really big, everyone just says, we got to get a movie out of this. And I can see, because The Last Ronin is a very not to use this word too much, but very cinematic comic book. When you're reading those issues, it's like you can see the pages moving, and that's what a good comic's like. A good comic is you can see the action moving, even though it's just still images. So I think this game will do very well. I don't think they even need to show that much yet because I think people are just hyped based on the idea. Yeah, I mean, we never even got a Ninja Turtle game quite like this. I know there was Mutants in Manhattan, which came out years ago, but that wasn't like open world. That was I didn't play it, but if I'm not mistaken, that was like you just kind of go linear through something, and then it's mostly like boss fights. It's from the same people who made Transformers Devastation, I think, but Devastation like really looked like the 80s cartoon, whereas Mutants in Manhattan looked more like the IDW comics or something. I know I heard some people say it wasn't very good. I thought it looked cool from the trailers. I thought the boss designs were really cool, like Bebop, Rocksteady, and Slash and Armagon and stuff. And I think it was Bebop had like a chainsaw when you fight him. I thought it looked cool, but a lot of people said it wasn't very good. It was kind of redundant. So I don't know. This is the first time really getting one where you can really just explore the world of the Turtles. It's really cool that it's the Last Ronin because I think the Last Ronin lends itself well to action and stuff. Although you'll have to add a lot more. I don't know if we're gonna play the flashbacks of the different turtles and stuff, but there aren't that many set pieces in the Last Ronin where you can make a massive game out of it. So it might take a lot of liberties from the comic. It might not be, a direct one-to-one, like you play the first scene from the first issue, then you watch the cut scenes for the next few issues, and then you play the end of the game and it's over. Like I think they're gonna take some liberties and make more situations that you can play, hopefully, or that game would be kind of weird. It would start off with a lot of gameplay, then it would mostly be none, and then it would end with a ton of gameplay. Yeah, it's cool that it's the Last Ronin. I almost kind of wish we got a game like this for regular Turtles, though. Like I imagine like the 1990 Turtles, kind of like the Spider-Man game where it's like actual New York City, but it's like a one-to-one recreation of what New York City looked like back in 1990. And you can explore that and at night as the Turtles looking like how they did it in the 1990 movie, and you can explore the sewers. There's a whole underground world you can explore also. I think that would be really cool, and that would be a good excuse to continue the 1990 world and add characters that were never in the movies without having to spend the insane amount of money to produce animatronics of characters like Leatherhead or something and put them in the movie world. Have it like, you can find bosses around the city and do missions and stuff, and you can see like a Leatherhead that looks like what he would look like if he was in the 1990 film series or something. And I think that would be really cool. It'd almost be like mixing the 87 cartoon world with the 1990 movie and just letting you explore it. And I think that would be really awesome. That would be probably, I think the fighting game I mentioned before would be my dream Turtles game, but I think that's a better Turtles game because that's like letting you be the Turtles. And I just think the 1990 movie has the perfect balance of comedy and matureness, where I think like it can be a little dark and edgy, but it can still be really cartoony and silly and stupid. So I think it's the perfect balance. Like when you want to please dark Turtle fans and you want to please jokey Turtle fans, there's no better route than the 1990 movie, in my opinion. It's never been topped. There's not really too much action figure news. The only action figure news I can really think of is NECA has put up the pre-orders for the sewer layer diorama. I was going to say playset, but it doesn't have any play features. So people are not happy about this. It's $300, I believe. And yeah, I'm not getting it. That's an easy pass for me. Eric made a good video about this recently. I'd say check it out on his channel. But yeah, this thing is extremely expensive for a very small, very simple bunch of plastic. It's just kind of a shoebox of plastic with some little sculpted, little assets in here and there. You don't even have the full play set unless you own the Big Mac accessory set that they put out this past year at Holothon, because that comes with the TV and everything and the game consoles and the VCR. And even if you want Big Mac and stuff, it comes with like a few things. It comes with like accessories you can use for the sewer den. Then there's also the Donatello portal side piece they made. So if you want to buy that and buy the Big Mac collection, that already I believe is going to be like over $100. Then you add that to $300 for the actual shoebox set that you're getting. And then you consider they're going to add Donatello's lab on at some point. And I think there might even be another room, like a kitchen. The kitchen might get it made at some point. You're going to have like, that's going to be like $700 or probably more. It's probably going to be over $1,000. Honestly, if each of those rooms is 300, even if they're 200, that's going to be over $1,000. And I don't think that's worth it. That's way more than the street diorama went on for sale at, originally, and that thing's massive. Now on the aftermarket, it's like over $1,000. I'm never going to get one. I would have got one if they were, if it was like 200, I'd get it. But that's so much bigger, and like this is essentially just a little accessory that plugs into the bottom of the street diorama set. So it does feel a bit weird that they're charging that much. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's really cool. I don't want to just crap on it. I think the diorama and both dioramas, especially when you put them together and you have the street on and the building and everything, the skyscraper, and then you have the sewer layer underneath that. That's really cool. I really like that, but it's just not worth the money that they're charging. Unfortunately, I just can't justify spending that much money, especially when you think if you have the sewer or you have the street diorama set, which is huge, and that stacks on top of the sewer diorama. Then you have another part on the side, maybe two other parts. Those are going to look weird unless you have a street diorama stacked on top of those. So in the end, you're going to be spending like $4,000 or $5,000 just to get a full NECA Toon diorama set. And that is not worth it, in my opinion. Like, it's very cool looking, but come on, NECA. Like, you got to know that, like, that's a bit too much for what they make is very simple. I mean, most of the reason why NECA products cost a lot is because all the articulation and all. And these are just flat pieces of hollow plastics, like no different than like when they did the Masters of the WWE Turnia, whatever, WWE Universe. When they did that, they had like the ring play set, and like that's just a hollow piece of plastic, and that thing cost like nothing. So I do think that they're charging way too much for those dioramas and those play sets and stuff. And I'm not even getting the party wagon. That looks really cool. That looks like a much better bargain, but I don't know. I can't see paying that much for the sewer play set. Again, the party wagon has moving wheels and opening doors and all these features and stuff in it that the sewer diorama set just doesn't have. It's just flat plastic. So it's cool, but honestly, get creative, make your own, because I've seen so many custom ones online that look amazing. People have done really good custom sewer play sets. I've seen people do like custom Technodrome play sets and stuff, or dioramas, I should say. They're not play sets, but they look really good. Honestly, I would say just go with those and don't bother giving NECA that much money for a glorified shoebox diorama, like a shadow box that you would use as a school assignment, like, oh, recreate the crossing of the Delaware with George Washington in a shoebox. You put down some blue construction paper and put in a toy boat, and it's. I wouldn't charge someone $300 for the Thanksgiving diorama I made in 4th grade. I wouldn't expect NECA to charge me $300 for their little diorama. I get it. It's a lot of plastic. It's, pretty detailed. Not that detailed. Again, like the NECA Toon stuff's pretty simple, but it's detailed. I get it, but I don't know. I just think that's a bit too high. I think 200, everyone would have jumped on it. I think 150 to 200 is the sweet spot. 250, I think a lot of people still would have been willing to do it. I think 300 is just a bit too high. Action figures are just getting a bit too expensive now. And I think people are starting to react to it. I think there's a lot of lines that people are starting to walk away from because they've kind of had enough. And there are some that are staying pretty affordable. We'll be talking about one later on. But in general, it seems like action figures are getting very expensive. I just, pre-ordered a bunch of those. Well, not really pre-ordered; they're already out. I just bought a few of those premium DNA Battletoads figures. I'll be getting those soon. I'll do a review for them on my channel, I guess. But they cost a lot. I actually did a payment plan on them because they're so expensive, and I'm not getting the big ones. There's like General Slaughter and General Vermin and stuff, and I'm not getting those. Those guys cost over $100 a piece, and it's like they're cool, but honestly, my memories of Battletoads are, renting it from the library or borrowing it from one of my brother's friends, playing it on the NES. I never even made it to most of those guys. I didn't make it to any of those guys. I believe General Vermin is who you fight in the raft level, the water raft level. And then General Slaughter is the bull guy you fight who walks back and forth, I think at the end of the rat race level, if I'm not mistaken. And I never made it that far as a kid. I didn't pay attention to who the bosses were in Battletoads or the enemies. I just got the two toads that are out and Porka Pig because that's the enemy you fight in the first level. So that's what I got. I'm not spending $500 for the whole set or whatever they're asking for. I just got the ones I want. Even those three were just expensive. And, I still got to save because, aside from still paying for work on my video game that I'm making, but also Super 7 supposedly by the end of this month is putting out Wave 8. And I don't know if they actually will, but I'll be getting, Space Raphael, Genghis Frog, and Robotic Rocksteady from that. And definitely I'm going to get Genghis Frog and Space Raph as soon as they go out. I might hold off on Robotic Rocksteady. But then we're supposed to get Wave 9 very shortly after that, this fall. And that's going to be expensive because that has Wingnut and Screwloose, who are very expensive. And then it has Scumbug, who is needlessly more expensive than the other figures. I don't know why Scumbug is $10 more than everyone else. I see nothing that justifies that price. He doesn't look particularly massive. He shouldn't be. He's a cockroach. So I don't see why the hell he's costing that much money. It doesn't make sense to me. It just seems like Super 7 kind of slaps whatever price they want on whatever figure. I'm sure there's some technical reason. I'm sure maybe some of the piping that goes into him from his backpack and stuff, maybe those are more expensive materials. I doubt $10 more expensive, but I don't know. For whatever reason, he's over $10. He's over $10. He's $10 more than a regular figure. I'm still going to get him. So that's going to be an expensive wave because I'm getting all 4 of the base figures. I'm getting Zach, Slam Dunk and Don, Scumbug, and Wingnut and Screwloose. Wingnut and Screwloose, I totally understand being more expensive because Wingnut is a big, fat, hefty figure. He's got those huge wings. He comes with a whole other micro figure. Not even micro. He's pretty big. He comes with a whole second character with Screwloose. I do think it's a little weird that Muckman, they had no problem putting him out at the same price as Casey Jones and Don and Mondo Gecko. Everyone in that wave was the same price. Because Muckman's a massive guy, and he's a very big, bulky figure. He comes with another articulated, fully painted little character. I think Screwloose is a bit bigger than Joe Eyeball. I think he's a bit more articulated. I'm not sure. But still, it does seem weird that there's a $20 jump in price between the two because, Muckman's very big and bulky, and he comes with a second figure. And he doesn't come with a ton of accessories, but he has the different hands, and he comes with the big gun, the big bazooka. And so it does feel a little weird that Screwloose is, Wingnut and Screwloose are $20 more than a regular figure, whereas Muckman was the same price. I feel like Screwloose and Wingnut should be $10 more than a regular figure, and Scumbug should just cost as much as a regular figure. But regardless, I'm getting that whole wave. Except for the Fox Splinter. I'm not going to go in on that. It's cool, but I don't go in on the variants. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of money. And then supposedly at some point this year, we're also finally getting Wave 7, which again, Gorilla is really expensive. He's $20 more than a regular figure. So Super 7 is going to be taking a lot of my money this year. So there's definitely no room for me to be spending $300 on a sewer playset diorama that, honestly, to be quite frank, I don't even have any space for in my room. I'd have to either start putting my stuff into other rooms in my house, or I would have to, severely reorganize some stuff and find some room for it, which wouldn't be too bad because then I can move a bunch of my NECA figures into that and clear up some space on those shelves for other action figures. But I still don't even know where the hell the Battletoads are going to go, to be honest. But yeah, I can't justify paying $300 for that sewer playset. If you're going to get it at that price, that's awesome. I'm not judging. If you think that's a good price, that's totally fine. You can go for it. I definitely understand why it's a really cool thing to have for your NECA collection. But for me personally, it's just, I can't justify it. I can't think of any reason to justify that. So I'm not going to go in on it personally. That just about does it for action figure news. There's not a ton this time. There's probably stuff I'm forgetting. There's always stuff I'm forgetting. There's so much Turtles news coming out all the time. So I'm probably forgetting stuff. There's little stupid shit I can mention, like, oh, I got the Turtles Mutant Mayhem cereal the week I saw the movie, and I had it, and it's not very good. But yeah, in general, there's so much stuff coming out. There's so much Turtles stuff that I'm sure there's stuff I'm forgetting. But for now, that's all the news I can think of.
This is April O'Neil, Channel 6 News, and you're watching the Party Wagon Podcast.
All right, so on to our main topic for today. We're going to be talking about kind of the redheaded stepchild of the modern Turtles action figure lines. And I mean no disrespect to any redheads. I think redheads are the most beautiful people on the planet. But this line is definitely the underdog. I think NECA and Super 7 are the big shots. Super 7's clearly the less favorable one of the two. NECA is the big shot. No one's on par with NECA. Super 7 is, among Turtle fans, they make a bigger deal out of them and they're more hyped and everything. But I think this one is more available and more people probably actually have this one. And that is the Best Action series, or BST AXN, by the Loyal Subjects. I don't know how the hell you pronounce action from AXN. That'd be Axon, Best Action. But for some reason, that's how they write it, Best Action. And I think a lot of people would debate that title, Best Action. But they're kind of made to be the more affordable option, because as I was saying before, action figure prices are through the roof these days. They're so high. And I think Loyal Subjects' approach is, we're going to make them, the joints won't be as strong. The plastic won't be as durable. They're not as big, but they're still highly articulated action figures with swappable parts and accessories and stuff. The articulation's not as good as something like NECA. It's a bit more limited. You can't get as many poses out of them usually. Also, the articulation is, as I said before, a little loose. It's not great, but it's not the worst. I'll get to that later. We'll talk about, the quality of Loyal Subjects figures after this. But for what they are, they're the affordable alternative to collectors' turtle figures for today. They're really not bad, honestly. For $20, $18, $20 per figure, depending where you buy them, depending on how long they've been out, you can even find them for like $15, $16 sometimes. They're pretty good. They're a line I wasn't going to collect originally. I was more into the Beetlejuice animated line that they announced, because there's just never been like proper action figures for that. There was like Happy Meals back in the day, but there's never been like proper Beetlejuice the animated series action figures. And they were like, oh, we're gonna do them. And I got excited. I'll come back to that later on. But yeah, I got the Beetlejuice one, and I had my issues with it, which I'll get into again later on. But it was cool just to have it. But then a friend of mine, Jake, who's so awesome, was nice enough to gift me last Christmas 6 of the Turtles best action figures. So I got all 4 Turtles. I got Shredder, and then he sent a second package which came with Casey Jones, among some other things. He also sent me like little cast iron turtle figures and stuff. So that was awesome. And it gave me a good chance to finally, you know, check out the line and see like what it had to offer and everything. And again, aside from the fact that the plastic feels a little more, a little softer, I guess a little cheaper than something like Super 7 or NECA would use. The joints are a lot looser. I think it's harder to stand a figure in a position. Like if you put a NECA figure in a pose, and then you like hit it with your hand or something, it'll fall over in the pose you have it in. If you bump into something with your hand that's a Loyal Subjects figure, it completely loses its pose. The legs spin out and go in random directions and stuff. The joints are definitely a lot weaker, a lot softer than an average collector figure. I think the posability is a bit limited on best action figures, but overall, they're really not bad. There's good paint on them. You know, it's not like amazing. Like it's not going to be as good as Super 7 or NECA, but for a $20 figure, the paint is pretty good. I think people are a bit too hard on these, but at the same time, I can kind of see why. I'm not going to pretend I can't see why. They definitely have their issues. One of the issues is definitely that they don't scale them that well. The turtles everyone's essentially the same height. So the turtles look massive because the turtles are just as tall as Bebop and Rocksteady and Shredder. But since they're meant to be shorter, they have these big heads, whereas Shredder's head and Bebop's head are really tiny. And it looks weird, definitely, to say the least. When you put them all together, I have them all like up on display up there. And I recently got Rocksteady and added him. I didn't have him for a while. They don't look great together because the turtles just stick out so much. I think aside from the turtles, most of the characters pair pretty well. Like Casey Jones next to Rocksteady and Bebop and Shredder, they look good, but the turtles look a little out of place, weirdly enough. They look out of place in their own toy line. So again, I can see that being something that people aren't that into about the line that can turn them off, is the fact that nothing scales properly. But the best action line is, I believe, fairly recent. I don't think it's that old. They've been doing it for years now, but not like a ton. Loyal Subjects did other figures prior. But best action is like a running line they have, where they have a lot of properties like Avatar: The Last Airbender. I see a lot for that. I think they do Bleach. They do some anime ones. I know Avatar isn't technically anime. Don't come at me. But yeah, they do some of those, and at some point they announced together we're going to be doing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and we're going to be doing Beetlejuice the animated series. And like I said, I actually got more excited for the Beetlejuice ones because like I've got a lot of freaking Ninja Turtle action figures. My whole room is full of them. So the Beetlejuice ones really caught my eye, and it was Beetlejuice and 2 variants of Lydia Dietz. There was the one where she's wearing the red spider poncho, like the most famous one. And then there was more of her casual garb, like her purple kind of robe or whatever the hell you want to call it, like dress that she wears a lot. And those were shown off, all 3 together at once, saying they were coming soon. Beetlejuice was shown as one of the accessories he came with as like a little sandworm. There's an episode where they find a baby sandworm and they have to Lydia wants to help it find its family, but Beetlejuice does it reluctantly because he's terrified of sandworms and all. But he was supposed to come with that. And then both of the Lydia figures were shown as coming with Ginger, the tap dancing spider character from the show. But when the Beetlejuice figure came out, he came with Ginger, and the little sandworm didn't exist. And only Beetlejuice came out. The Lydia figures never came out. And that was years ago now. That was like 2 years ago that the Beetlejuice figure came out. There's no update on the Lydia one. Or both the Lydia ones. Every now and then, like every 5-6 months, I'll go online and just check up, like, hey, whatever happened to those? Are those out yet? And you find nothing, just radio silence. And every now and then I'll see like an old forum that comes up from like the beginning of this year or something. And people will be asking like, hey, what the hell happened to those Lydia figures? And some people are like, oh, I'm staying hopeful. But in actuality, I don't think they're coming out. I think they got canceled. Maybe the Beetlejuice didn't sell as well as they hoped it would have or something. Maybe it could be the factory issues. They might be coming out eventually, but I wouldn't hold my breath for the Lydia figures, which is a shame because she's like never really gotten a very good piece of merchandise. There was like for the movie, there was a stuffed doll that was added to Spirit Halloween last year when she's in her photographer outfit. And that was pretty cool, but there's not a lot of like good Lydia merchandise out there. And I was kind of hoping that, the Beetlejuice and the Lydia ones would sell so well that then they could start doing like Jacques, the skeleton guy, French skeleton who's always working out, or Beetlejuice's neighbor, who's like that weird hairy cowboy monster with the little bison dog and stuff. Like, I was kind of hoping they'd do a whole line of Beetlejuice animated series characters, and even like Prince Vince would be awesome, but maybe do Lydia's parents, or I thought they were going to do that, but no, unfortunately, I think the Beetlejuice line is just done. But the Ninja Turtle line seems to be blowing up. The Ninja Turtle line is getting a ton of figures, but seeing the way they handled the Beetlejuice one, not only am I disappointed because I wanted more Beetlejuice, but it also kind of shows how they probably run their company. And it just makes me think that we shouldn't get too excited when they announce figures. Like, don't get too excited until the figure physically exists. It's a lot like Premium DNA, where they've had a lot of issues in the past, back because they used to be Megalopolis Toys and they used to just be a toy store. And I had issues where they canceled one of my orders. They canceled. I originally ordered the Super 7 Rocksteady Ultimate from them, and they canceled that on me. And, luckily I got my money back, but it took forever for them to finally tell me that they canceled it. I've heard a lot of people have horror stories where their items were canceled and they weren't reimbursed for it. So crossing my fingers, I actually get my Battletoads. But yeah, so you have a lot of companies like that. You have Super 7 who's been canceling stuff and everything and saying like they announce so much shit and it just seems like they can't actually live up to these promises. So it just makes me think that, Best Action is probably going to do the same thing. So when people read that they're doing all these crazy IDW characters like Alopex and stuff, it's like, I wouldn't get too excited just yet. Like, let's wait until they actually start surfacing, because I think a good deal of the things they announce can get canceled. But that being said, they are diving deep into Turtles, and they are doing a lot of Turtles characters, and some of them, I think it's a bit of overlap. I think they're not going to sell that well. Currently, they've been doing a lot of the animated series ones. They made like a larger Krang one, that Android body, that some people said was really good. I don't have that. I don't have the April, but I did see the regular Bubble Walker Krang in a store. And again, it's scaled terribly. He's humongous, but it's a really good Krang figure. It looks really nice. But I think in general, the Toon figures are kind of the wrong way to go for them, because they did Slash. They're doing a bunch of the Toon figures. They're even doing Razar and Toka in the Toon style. And I think NECA already has that line like monopolized. Like, everyone knows NECA is the Toon line company. So it seems a little silly for loyal subjects trying to make a competing line that's just not able to really be on the level of NECA. I mean, you look at the Rocksteady one, and You know, they tried to do a gimmick where you could swap human and animal parts for Bebop and Rocksteady, so you could have them as the human and as the animal. But the Bebop one, when he's a human, is just way too buff because he wasn't that buff as a human. He was skinnier. And he actually wore sleeves and stuff originally. He had like the white shirt on, which he doesn't have for the toy. And then Rocksteady, as the Rhino, he's like wearing like a jacket with sleeves, which he never wore in the cartoon. And even as a human, he didn't wear that in the cartoon. So they couldn't change the arms; they could only change the hands. So Rocksteady comes with a human head and 2 human hands. But even the sculpt on Rocksteady's face is a little weird looking. I think the Rocksteady's not one of their better figures. At the same time, I kind of don't mind that he doesn't really look like the 87 cartoon figure, because again, we already have NECA doing the Toon line and stuff, and it's like we have other ways of getting better looking Toon Rocksteadies. So I kind of prefer loyal subjects to just do their own thing and make alternate interpretations of these characters. So even though I don't think they should be doing as much of the Toon ones, I think if they're going to, I think they should go the route of the Rocksteady, despite me just saying I didn't think the Rocksteady figure was very good. Just a little more of like a personalized version. They've also been doing some like arcade figures. I know they're doing arcade Toka and Rossar, but they've done the Turtles and stuff too. But again, that's something that NECA's done. There's no doubt NECA's going to do the Turtles in Time versions of Toka and Razar at some point. The Super Nintendo ones where Toka's like Periwinkle and shoots. They're probably going to give him like the ice breath and give Razar the fire breath and stuff. So I would say NECA is going to do those. They already have the Toon Razar and Toka sculpts. There's no way we're not getting those at some point. So I do think loyal subjects doing the arcade figures is kind of pointless, if I'm going to be honest. I just don't think they should be doing the same things that NECA's doing. What they should be doing is they've started doing IDW Turtles, and I think that is what they should be doing is IDW and Image. They did like an Image KC and stuff. Do these versions of the Turtles that people love that don't have action figure lines right now. I'd say jump into the 2003 cartoon, honestly, or the 2012 cartoon, or Rise. Like, do the stuff that NECA and Super 7 aren't doing. I think that's the smart thing to do for them. Don't attempt something you can't actually do because the quality has to be too high, like the movie figures, which they haven't even attempted movie stuff. And don't attempt to recreate the things that other companies are already doing better. So I think they're better off doing their own thing, though. I will say it is interesting to get the loyal subjects Toon figures because they are very different from the NECA ones. They don't have the black lines. They don't have the kind of like cell shading, like hard cell shading that the NECA ones do. To a certain degree, I actually like the deco of the loyal subject ones a bit better because I'm not a big fan of the way they do the deco on the NECA ones. I love that line, but not the hugest fan of the way they do the deco. But those figures are just way better than the loyal subject ones altogether. So I really think the loyal subjects should be doing unique figures. And I think I've seen they recently released, for SDCC, they released like those highly detailed versions of the IDW Turtles. And I've heard the retail ones are going to be nowhere near as detailed as those ones. But these ones look really good. I do have to say the IDW ones they released look really good. I'm not really an IDW guy. I don't like the faces of the turtles in the IDW comics. Nothing against the comics. I've just never read them. I've like followed what happens in them a bit, but I've never actually sat and read an IDW comic. But I don't really like the art style of the IDW turtles. They look weird to me. They look more like a human head wearing some prosthetics to make them look like an alien turtle man rather than a proper Ninja Turtle. They don't really look like Ninja Turtles. They don't have like the wide cheeks or anything, or they just don't have that look. They don't have that turtle look, the big mouths and all. They have these like weird too human faces. Their faces are a bit too human for me, honestly. They look a bit weird. They're just like these bald humans with like no noses and no ears. They're kind of weird looking. But as action figure representations of those turtles, the loyal subject ones look really good, actually. I do have to say, they're really good. I don't know what they're going to look like without all that extra deco, but I imagine they'll still look pretty good because those are pretty solid sculpts. And honestly, if someone wanted to, if you have the know-how, you could put a wash on them. You could, add a little bit of detailing if you wanted. And I think that's the thing about loyal subjects figures is if you're a kit bash guy, if you're a custom guy, I think you can make some awesome figures out of the loyal subject stuff using those as a base and then kind of building on them, because a lot of the cheaper look of them comes from the fact that the paint is so limited. There's minimal deco and everything. So I think even if you just added some like, dry brushing, like some faded dry brush to some of the details and like added a little bit of shading to them, those figures could go from being like, 3 or 4s out of 10s to being like 8 or 9s out of 10s. Like they could look really cool, actually. I think that another weird thing, though, about the best action figures is the sizing, the scaling. I already mentioned that they don't scale with each other, but they don't really scale with any other action figure line I can think of personally. They're kind of, I guess they're like 5.5. They're kind of in scale with like retro Motu figures. But they don't scale with the vintage turtles. They don't scale with the NECA turtles. They definitely don't scale with the Super 7 turtles. They're kind of just their own thing. And even though the Super 7 turtles don't scale with most other action figures, they scale with enough. They scale with all other Super 7 Ultimates. They scale with, the Premium DNA, Battletoads figures and stuff, and Earthworm Jim and all, I'm sure they scale with. And I believe they scale decently, even with some stuff like Mythic Legions and all. So it's not too bad. Whereas like the best action figures, they really don't scale with anything but themselves. And they're a very weird scale. Honestly, the closest thing I can think of that they scale with, even then they're a little bit taller, is the Toonie Terrors that NECA does, which are like those limited articulation, like horror movie characters as cartoons. And they've done other cartoon ones like Bill and Ted that I have, and they've done like Ace Ventura and the Back to the Future cartoon characters and stuff. Those, I think, scale better with the loyal subjects than anything else. But for the most part, the loyal subjects figures don't really scale with anything else you have. So they're not going to be able to be integrated into other displays. They're kind of just their own thing. So if that's not something you want to just blend them in with your own your pre-existing shelves, and you want everything to be scaled properly, I would say they're not for you. So to talk about some of the flaws with the loyal subjects best action figures, because I'm kind of trying to like weigh the flaws and the pros and the cons right now. Sorry, this is very unorganized. I'm like all over the place. One second I'm talking about Beetlejuice, and the next second I'm talking about good things about them. Next second I'm talking about bad things about them. I think I'm going to try to focus on what the main flaws in them are right now. And I can't really do that without mentioning Beetlejuice again. So we're going to go back to that Beetlejuice figure that I bought. And there's just certain little things about it that make it not as good as it could have been. For one, I've already mentioned the loose joints. He comes with a top hat. I didn't like him wearing it. I wanted him like holding it, like kind of like he just took it off his head or something. And his arm, the joints in his arm are so weak, it's very hard to get him to hold it like that without his arm just falling down, just unfolding and drooping down. He drops the top hat very easily. He doesn't really get a good grip on a lot of his accessories. The articulation is very limited. You can't get very good posing out of him. And that's a bit of a bummer because it's hard to get a loyal subjects figure to do anything but just stand straight up. Because if you try any other pose, it just doesn't look right. It can't quite be done, or they just fall over. So your loyal subjects displays are not going to be that interesting. They're going to be a little more boring than, something like Super 7 or NECA, where you can put in all kinds of crazy poses. Yeah, I think the articulation sometimes also ruins the sculpt. For how limited it is, I think it's done kind of badly too. So Beetlejuice has like a chest cut. He has like articulation on his chest, but he also has like an opening in his jacket where you can see his purple undershirt and then a black tie. But the sculpt of the black tie and the undershirt get cut by the articulation. So if you move the top half of him to the side, that completely destroys the sculpt and ruins the illusion of the figure, and it just ends up making it look wrong and look crappy. So I don't think you should even have that articulation there, because you'll never want to use it because it looks like crap. So I do think that's a problem with the loyal subjects, is they don't have very good articulation, despite at the beginning of this podcast me saying they had good articulation for the price. But their articulation, it feels like they're trying to do what other companies are doing, but they can't quite do it with the budget and stuff that they're doing. And yeah, I don't like articulation that completely destroys a sculpt like that. That like just ruins the look of a character. If NECA had done that, the whole midsection of Beetlejuice would have a soft overlay with like an articulated chest and abdomen and everything underneath, but then he'd have a soft overlay that looks like his jacket. And that's what I wish they would do, but then, they don't do things like that. So instead, he just has this chest swivel that he shouldn't even have, because you can't use it without ruining the whole look of the figure. Another thing is, it's getting a bit picky, but their color choices are not great usually. They usually go with kind of odd color choices for their figures. They don't quite look right. Like Beetlejuice, for example. What color skin would you say Beetlejuice has? Most people would probably say like white, gray. I would say kind of like a very, very, very pale lavender, kind of like a purple, like a dark, like kind of like a dullish, bluish, cool kind of purple, but like very, very pale, very white, like a corpse, like something that a body that has had all the blood, pulled out of it. But for the figure, he's like hot pink. He's like neon pink. His skin is I can see it from here. It's so bright. It's like neon pink for his skin, and it just doesn't look right. And it didn't look that way in the original promo images when they showed the CG test shots of what it's going to look like. That's not the figure they promised us. Anytime they showed off the figure, the coloring looked much better. The paint looked much better than it actually did in the finished product. And also, like, a lot of the paint on his face, of the smaller detail, like his teeth and his eyebrows, it's a little cheap when you look at it up front. It doesn't really look very good. There's a lot of overlap of colors. It's applied pretty sloppily. The white stripes on his suit are painted on an all black body. So it's pretty dull. It doesn't pop the way you'd expect it to. Like, the white on the NECA Toon Usagi Yojimbo pops so much because it's just so bright, so vibrant. But they really should have sculpted him out of white plastic and painted the black stripes on, because the white stripes just look, not the band, but the white stripes on Beetlejuice's suit look very dull on that action figure. And it's a bummer, because his neon hot pink fucking eye burning skin color stands out so much more than the white that should stand out. The whole point of having white and black stripes is to have that stark contrast, but it doesn't really pop that much. And that's just the thing a lot, in the test pictures, it popped like crazy. He had very bright white and very dark black. And I mean, I'm really like, I'm kind of just giving a review of this freaking figure right now, but I'm really honing in on this. And I know it sounds like I'm just nitpicking, but I think that's the kind of stuff that unfortunately makes people not really care about loyal subjects that much. It's just those little choices they make to save money. And I understand, because I would never buy that figure for $30, even if it was well painted. But I think, if they improved the articulation, the materials a little bit more, and the painting a little bit more, and maybe did charge $30 for their figures, it wouldn't feel as bad because you'd be getting something so much more premium. You'd be getting what you actually want and paying a little bit more, as opposed to $20. It's a good price for a collector figure, but that's still expensive. It's still $20. That's still a good chunk of money for a little toy that's that big. So when you consider that you can get for $10 any of the vintage reproductions that Playmates puts out of the classic 1988 action figure line for Turtles, that's like, okay, I know the articulation's way more limited for those than it is for the best action ones, but the articulation works better. And I don't know, you just feel like, okay, $10, I'm okay paying that. The loyal subject ones, I don't think they feel premium enough to justify paying $10 more than you would for the Playmates ones. There's a lot of modern action figures now that are, pretty well articulated for just regular kids' toys that are $10. Because, there's like the Jakks Pacific one. So I collect some of the Jakks Pacific Sonic figures and some of the Mario figures. I got like the Koopalings and stuff. And they're not great articulation. They're pretty limited. But for a $10 figure, they're really not that bad. The likenesses are great. The paint is pretty good. There's some flaws here and there, but usually the painting's pretty great. And the articulation's like all you really need. You can get some pretty good poses out of them. They're pretty limited, but I'm not going to lie. I have my Sonic characters in more interesting poses than I do my Loyal Subjects figures. And those Sonic figures were $10 a pop. And the Loyal Subjects figures are $20. And the Sonic figures look exactly like the characters they're supposed to. The Mario figures look exactly like the models from the game. The Loyal Subjects figures, I don't mind them being unique, but they don't look like what they're trying to make them look like. They're not trying to make unique designs for the characters. Their idea is we are making action figures of the way they looked in the 1987 cartoon, and they don't look like that. So I can't justify paying $10 more than I would for a Jakks Pacific toy for the Loyal Subjects, when the Loyal Subjects is like same loose articulation as Jakks Pacific. And even though they do have more advanced quote unquote articulation in the Loyal Subjects than Jakks Pacific, it doesn't really come off that way. And you really can't get any crazier poses out of them than you could get out of Jakks Pacific toys, honestly. It's really not even that much better than the Jakks Pacific articulation. It's like usually the arms are just a bit more articulated, but that's another thing too, though, is for the Beetlejuice one is like, he's supposed to be a one-to-one recreation of the way he looked in the animated series. And the way he looked in the animated series, he had almost like a pear-shaped body where he had like a fat gut. And then he had these like kind of short, stumpy legs with little tiny feet underneath them. But for the best action one, he has like long man legs. Like he has normal human proportioned legs with normal sized feet on the bottom. Like anyone who knows Tim Burton's art style knows he draws those itty bitty little tiny feet on everybody. Beetlejuice in the original cartoon had these little dress shoes, these tiny little feet. And again, his legs were not very long. They were pretty squat. He was a pretty squat character. Like he was tall he was like kind of longer on top and then got squat on the bottom. He was, he's considerably taller than Lydia, but he's not like, he doesn't have basketball player legs. He doesn't have freaking Hakeem Olajuwon legs. So I don't know why they gave him those legs. And it just seems like that's a thing with the Loyal Subjects is they don't commit to designs very much. A lot of times the characters don't quite capture the look they're supposed to because everyone more or less has like the same body build and stuff, where NECA will go out of its way to give you crazy stuff like Mutagen Man and the Punk Frogs and the Neutrinos and that, Mirage Splinter they just made, or the Mirage Zog that they just made, that they're very different from the normal anatomy. Like look at their Wingnut. Like he's a totally different build than anybody else. Early on, they did a lot more of that, like Leatherhead was kind of just made out of leftover parts of Rocksteady, and then the Triceratons were made out of leftover parts of Leatherhead. But now they've gotten much better at doing variety. I don't think the best action ones do that very well. I don't think the Loyal Subjects do that well, which is a shame because that was one of the things I really looked forward to about the Lydia ones is from the promo pictures, she looked identical to how she looked in the cartoon. She looked like a perfect recreation of how she looked in the cartoon. And that was exciting because it's like you don't see that a lot. And it's kind of a shame that that those Lydia figures are probably never coming out, and that probably means no Beetlejuice figures are coming out. But also that Beetlejuice didn't look like how he should. Like it's weird that they were going to get Lydia correct, but Beetlejuice, for some reason, they changed his anatomy and made him look different than how he should. And I understand that Tim Burton characters are very hard to adapt into action figure form, despite how many companies try to do Nightmare Before Christmas action figures. Hats off to them. That's a hell of a challenge because those characters are very hard to adapt. He draws very anatomically incorrect characters. And it's one of the things that's so great about his art style. It's so unique. I love his art style, but it's hard to make functioning action figures with articulation that mimics our own movements when, Beetlejuice in the cartoon, his arms are just kind of these noodles that they can bend at the elbow like ours, but other times they're just like noodles. And I think he just looks a bit too stiff and restrained in action figure form. It doesn't work as well. I think Nightmare Before Christmas, if done really well, can work okay because they were essentially toys in the movie already anyway. But the Beetlejuice cartoon, which, it's not 100% Tim Burton's art style. It's kind of like a late 80s, early 90s cartoon looking adaptation of his art style. But even then, it's like they're just such zany character designs that, it's hard to make those action figures without packaging a stand with all of them just so they can stand up and stuff. So I honestly think I would have rather seen NECA just do a Beetlejuice animated line than the Loyal Subjects. And they would have actually put it out. It would have existed already. And they would have looked exactly like they should have in the cartoon. The Toony Terrors Beetlejuice is based on the movie one, and I don't think it looks very good. It looks pretty bad, especially the stripes make no sense on the suit. But that's not what I'm talking about. If they did like what they did for Back to the Future and stuff, but with Beetlejuice, the animated series, I think those would be amazing figures. But I've talked about Beetlejuice for way too long on this Ninja Turtle podcast. So let me get back to Turtles. I'm sorry about that, but I think the Beetlejuice figure is just the perfect example of what I'm saying about them. Like there's something about them that they're almost a great toy company. They're almost the perfect low budget, alternative option for collectors outside of NECA and Super 7. Like if you can't afford those, here you are. But there's just a few things I think hold them back that prevent them from ever being as big as those. Definitely as big as NECA. They might overtake Super 7 just because Super 7 is getting so much, bad publicity now because of things that are going wrong with the company. But I think there's just a bit too many limitations. I think just the articulation needs to be a little better. The paint needs to be a little bit better, and the sculpts need to be a little more realized. I think if those three things were improved, I think Loyal Subjects would do a lot better. Because I got to say, when I go to the store, I walk into a Target, all the NECA Turtles are gone. All the Super 7 Reaction Turtles are gone. All the Playmates Classic Turtles are gone. You still see a million freaking Loyal Subjects figures on the pegs, though. There's so many. Those Punk Turtles, which had the alts, there was essentially 8 of them. They've just been everywhere. They're so easy to find. I had no plans of getting them. I'll just get them if they go on clearance for like $10, $5. I'll grab them then. But I just couldn't justify paying $20 for them. But yeah, that's the thing. I think most people feel that way. I think people just can't justify paying $20. I think if they improve them a little bit, made those improvements I said, and charged 25, hopefully, maybe 30 if they absolutely have to, I think then they'd fly off of pegs. But I think there's just a few things about them that just hold them back. everyone wants to be like NECA these days. Every toy company wants as many licenses as they can possibly get, and just make a million different lines based on the same size and anatomy and scale and everything of the other line that's really popular. Like, NECA has their Ultimates, where all their horror figures and all their Turtles figures and everything, they all scale with each other. They all look good together. They have whole bunch. They have Dungeons and Dragons figures and everything, and they all scale together. They're all in that style. Super 7 has their Ultimates, where Thundercats and Silverhawks and Ninja Turtles and all that stuff scale together. They all scale. Loyal Subjects is trying to make Best Action that line, like that kind of thing for them, where they get a bunch of licenses and they all scale together. But I think the problem with them is they're very slow to get licenses, which isn't a problem. I think just get a few and do them well rather than just, pumping out as much as you can. But I think a lot of them, they just they don't go anywhere. They start the line and then they kind of get bored of them, or they don't make enough money and they can't afford to continue them. And they just continue with Turtles. It seems like Turtles is the one they keep continuing with, because that probably sells the most, because Turtles and toys just go together like peanut butter and jelly, or pizza and pepperoni, I guess I should say. But they try to do a lot of lines that other people are already doing. They try to do Gremlins, and I don't think anyone cares about their Gremlins figures, because NECA has these perfect, amazing Gremlins figures. And every character, they have the Flasher Gremlin, they have the Brain Gremlin, they have Greta Gremlin, and they have a million different alts of Greta. There's 3 Greta action figures or something. They have the caroling, Christmas caroling Gremlins. They have a bunch of Gizmo and stuff, and they're amazing. They look just like the puppets from the movie. So I don't really know why Loyal Subjects is bothering doing lines that NECA is already knocking it out of the park with and has been selling gangbusters with for years now. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think what Loyal Subjects needs to do is they need to look at what other toy companies are doing, and they need to think, what aren't they making? Super 7 keeps saying they made the Thundercats Ultimates, and everyone's like, oh, these are great. Or more so, they started working on Motu Origins, and everyone's like, these are great. You should make Thundercats. They started making Thundercats. Everyone's like, oh, these are amazing. When are we getting Silverhawks? They finally start making Silverhawks, and suddenly everyone's like, where the hell are the Tiger Sharks? So even Super 7 said, look, we don't know if we're ever going to do the fucking Tiger Sharks. Just enjoy what we're making and stop asking about what's coming next. And I don't blame them. But that's where Loyal Subjects should be like, maybe we could grab the Tiger Sharks. Maybe we can do a Tiger Sharks line. I don't know if that's too risky. Maybe that wouldn't be a good decision, but I think that's the kind of thing they should be doing more of. Look at what lines people are asking for, but nobody's making. And I think that would be a good thing to do. I don't remember the name of the company, but there's the company that's doing the Mega Man figures and the Street Fighter figures. And I believe those are doing pretty well. I want to get the Mega Man ones. I don't know if they're out yet, but I really want to get the Mega Man ones. At least the Robot Masters. I don't need all the alts of Mega Man in different colors. I'll just get base Mega Man and that's it. But yeah, they're doing a line that people want. They're doing lines that people want, and they're doing them well. And they're the only ones doing them. So, there's probably going to be some Street Fighter characters they do that I'm going to have to get because I like some Street Fighter characters a lot. So that's cool. I think that's what Best Action should be doing. And with the Avatar stuff and the Bleach stuff and all, they kind of were doing that. I think that's why those lines have done a little bit better, is because no one is doing collector American action figures of characters properties like Bleach, or they might do One Piece or something. I don't know if they do, but usually you have to get some imported collectible figure, figurine, some statue or something for those characters. Where if you want an actual posable action figure, I don't know how many US distributors are doing those. I'm sure SH Figuarts is probably doing all of those properties, but for the most part, I don't think they're that common. I could be wrong, but maybe there's a million of them. But it just seems like they should be doing these properties that don't get a lot of action figures, collectible action figures. They should be doing popular properties. And that's why I like them doing the IDW Turtles, because no one else is doing the IDW Turtles, and no one probably will. Like NECA, I don't think is going to move on to IDW next. If they were going to move on to another series of Turtles, they'd probably move on to 2003, would be my guess. I predict NECA would do 2003, 2007, and 2012 before ever doing IDW. I personally think. I think 2003 is a niche one that'll. There are a bunch of people who are asking for it, and no one's doing it right now. So honestly, I think Loyal Subjects might be smart to jump in on that. But we'll see. We'll see how good that their, stranger figures do. I guess, like, if you do the base 87 Turtles, obviously those are going to sell, because even though most people are buying NECA and Super 7 and all, Turtles figures just sell. If someone sees a Turtles figure on a shelf and that's the only one left, they'll just buy it. Like, they don't have any of the NECA ones I want, but they have this figure, so I might as well just buy it. It's still Turtles. But not every property sells as well as Turtles, and not everything Turtles sells as well as the 87 Turtles. So I don't know. Maybe if they did the 2003 series, it would just bomb. We'll have to see how the IDW series does, if that is selling well. Archie is selling very well for NECA. The Archie figures, they just go, and you never see them again. So I don't know. It's hard to say. Is that just because NECA does so well and everyone wants everything Turtles they make? Or is that because people actually want figures of these more obscure versions of the Turtles? I really don't know. But it's hard to say, because, I've been sitting here for a while saying that Best Action should be doing that. Loyal Subjects should be doing that. They should be making more obscure Turtles figures. But at the end of the day, like, they're such a small toy company. They're not in a position where they can do experiments like that and like tests like that. Like, okay, let's make a bunch of weird ass figures and see if people even give a shit about them. Because if they don't, it's not like they can be like, okay, we'll learn from that and make a different approach next time. It's like, oh no, if they fail with that, they probably go bankrupt. So it's hard to say. I know they're in a rough position. Honestly, I guess what I really comes down to, even though my opinions have been back and forth so much this whole podcast, I guess what it really comes down to is I think their approach should be just keep doing what they're doing and just up the quality and maybe the price a little bit. And like I said, I really think that's the thing that will fix it. Like, make the figures look like the 3D prototypes. Make the figures look like what you advertise. Make them a little sturdier, make them a little higher quality, up the price a little bit, 25 or 30 for a Loyal Subjects figure. And then you have something pretty good, I think. I think then they'll start making more sales, I think. I think the thing that might be killing them is that they're trying to stay so cheap with everything. They're trying to corner that cheap collector market. The collectors who don't want to spend a lot of money. They look at the NECA stuff like, I want all that, but my wallet doesn't. So they just settle for, I don't want to say the next best thing, because Loyal Subjects is not the next best thing. But again, I do think Loyal Subjects are good. I like their figures. I'm going to keep getting some of the Turtles ones. I'm going to get April and Krang and Slash and stuff. And I don't know. I've seen like the Turtles in Disguise, the Punk Turtles, a million times in the stores, and I haven't grabbed them. I think it's going to take more than an alt for me to grab a Loyal Subjects figure. Like, if they made Mondo Gecko, or they made Muckman, or they made Mona Lisa or something, I'd grab those. If they make like characters I'm excited about like that, I would grab them, a Triceraton or something. But for the most part, I don't think I'm not going to go in on every little thing they make, because it's like a cool little extra sideline. I don't see Loyal Subjects being anyone's like main action figure line. Like, no one's like, I only collect Loyal Subjects. I think most people are like, I collect NECA, or I collect Super 7, or I collect NECA and Super 7, or I collect a whole bunch of other stuff, like, I don't know, Mezco, or Mego, or Boss Fight Studios, or any of those. And I collect those figures, Loyal Subjects. We're not loyal. That's what we're talking about. Mythic Legions or just Legions in general. Like people collect that kind of stuff. And they're like, oh, and on the side, I pick up some of these Loyal Subjects figures. I don't think anyone's like a diehard, exclusively Loyal Subjects collector. And like, they're, on the side, I pick up a couple NECA figures, but I'm not serious about them. It's like, if you're serious about toy collecting, you're probably not specializing in Loyal Subjects. They're a fun addition to have, but I don't think they're anybody's main toy line. All that being said, I will say I do like that they exist, though. I like there being other options. I am not a fan of monopolies. I don't want to see NECA monopolize the Ninja Turtle market because, we don't know how much longer Super 7's going to keep doing Turtles. I'd love to think they're going to keep doing it for years. We don't know. We really don't know, what's going on with Super 7. And then you have Playmates is always doing their stuff and all, but it's nice to have options. I think like even if not everyone's going to jump on the Loyal Subjects ones, and a lot of big collectors aren't going to really care for them, I think it's important to have options for collectors. And there are cheaper ones, there are different looking ones, there is variety. It's not like, oh, if you want to collect Turtles figures, you have to collect these super expensive ones that sell out immediately, are impossible to come by, and it's very hard and stressful to collect the whole line. You can collect a bunch of just other alternatives that are still good figures. They're still fun. You'll still enjoy them, but they're not quite as good as the others. I do think that is important for Loyal Subjects to exist for that reason, because there are some people, they like Ninja Turtles, they might even love Ninja Turtles, but they're not big toy collectors, but they like to decorate their room with just like collectibles and stuff. So not like a ton like me, not like this crazy man baby cave, but like maybe on their like work desk they just want a few Turtles characters standing on there, and they don't really care what they look like as long as they kind of look like the Turtles characters. And if they're $20, the price might be right, and they might just go with that. So I do think they are important to have on the market. I do think they're good to have out there. I don't like any monopoly ever happening. I don't like anyone being the one source to go to, because then they'll also charge you ridiculous prices, which they already are. But I've just seen that happen so much in my lifetime. Like, I saw Toys R Us monopolize the toy market, and then they went out of business. I saw, GameStop totally monopolize the game industry. They bought up every game company like Funkoland and Electronics Boutique and stuff. And I've just seen so much happen. Barnes and Noble monopolized the bookstore market and stuff. And it's just like there's one store for everything now. And then Walmart puts them out of business because they start selling all of that stuff. And then Amazon puts Walmart out of business because no one wants to leave their houses and do anything anymore. Everyone wants to just sit inside like we're in fucking WALL-E and just stare at a screen all day and have things show up on your doorstep that a drone dropped off. Don't get me started on all that. So, yeah, I don't like monopolies. I like there always being options for people to buy things, whether, depending on what their price range is or what their preference is. And I think it is good to have healthy competition and have healthy alternatives to things. So toys aren't just like these super expensive grails. There's other things people can collect and have fun with. So I think as like a cynical older adult collector, I look at it and think like, well, who's collecting these? But when I look at it from a logical standpoint, I think it's a very good idea to have them, and I'm glad they're there. And I am glad I have the ones I have. I like the way they look. I even have the packages like stacked up in my room, kind of like on display. Yeah, they're cool figures. They're neat figures. Are they the best quality? No. Are they a little gummy? Are the accessories very gummy and stuff and warped? Yes, usually. Is the articulation great? No. Is the paint perfect? No. Is the anatomy perfect? No. Is the scaling perfect? No. Nothing's perfect, but they're good for what they are. I think like companies like NECA and Super 7 have kind of got my expectations too high, where I feel like 10 years ago I would have been fine with the Loyal Subjects figures, but now like they've kind of raised the bar so much that it's hard for me to settle for a figure that doesn't look perfect. So I think loyal subjects are good. I think, again, they're a good alternative for collectors who don't want to spend a ton of money on this stuff and just want to have some fun Ninja Turtles merchandise. And for someone who is a serious collector, they're a fun side thing to collect as well, just to up your display and have even more variety of Turtles products or other lines that you might like from loyal subjects. So final consensus, they have a lot of problems, but I think it's good that they exist, if that makes any sense. They're good figures. They're not great. They're very flawed, but I'm glad they exist. Okay, that's about it. This is probably going to be a shorter podcast than most of them because it's just me. And, normally Eric's talking too. So it's about double the length because Eric, gets to talk. Also, it's two people's thoughts, not just one person's thought. So, I know I talk fast also. I need to work on that. There's been times where I listen to our podcasts and I annoy myself with how fast I'm talking. But yes, that's probably it for today. Thanks for listening. Don't worry, Eric will be back in the next episode. It won't just be one guy rambling for an hour and a half. And check out Eric's recent video on the sewer playset, the sewer diorama from NECA. Or actually, check out all the stuff he does. He does great action figure videos. He's done so many. I barely even do that many action figure videos anymore. I continued my Turtle Talk series recently with Leo variants. I hope to do Michelangelo variants sometime in the near future. But yeah, he actually stays on top of that stuff. So follow Eric. He has a better channel. Follow me if you want. And thanks for listening to this episode of the Party Wagon Podcast.